We had a lot of duds in week 1. Should you panic or should you trade for them? First up, Drake London, 1 target, 0 fantasy points. He's a player that I'm going to say I am starting to panic. Now, I already had a little bit of hesitation going into the season. The quarterback play with Desmond Ridder, already a little bit of a concern. And then he gets 1 target and they just run the ball and run the ball. Part of it is that they were winning the game, so they were able to run. So I think it's going to get a little better for him. However, there's going to be a lot of games where they just want to run the ball. Last season in 2022, they passed 44.7% of the time, which was 31st in the league, and then they drafted Bijan Robinson. So you can only imagine it's going to continue, if not get worse in that situation. Ridder attempted 18 passes. That was the least in the league by 4. The second lowest was 22. So there's not a lot of volume to go around now. The 1 target should go up. His target share has been pretty good. Obviously, he should be the elite guy in that offense if there is one. But I don't think he's going to be any kind of consistent. He's really going to be tough to start on a weekly basis. The only hope, the reason I'm not full panic mode, is that last year with Ridder, in the last 4 games of the season, he averaged 9 targets and 83 yards, which is still pretty good. So in games where they're maybe trying to come back from behind and they're actually forced to pass a little bit, I think you could have some good games.
All right, next up is going to be T. Higgins, and you can kind of throw Jahmyr Chase in with the same arguments as well. I know no one's panicking on Jahmyr Chase, but he also had a bad game. So T. Higgins had 0 points. So obviously getting goose-egged is not fun, and you do not enjoy it. But he did have 8 targets if you look on paper. But of those 8 targets, only 2 of them were deemed catchable. The rest were like throwaways out of bounds or just way over his head that wasn't even deemed catchable by PFF. Burrow looked awful. Not even going to sugarcoat it. He looked absolute trash. I think he had like 83 passing yards the entire game, which is not even NFL starter level. But he missed all of preseason, some of training camp due to that calf injury. And this is a trend now. If you look at the past 3 to 4 years that Burrow has played and started off, they sucked week 1 every single year. Something happens where he misses time, and then week 1 they start slow. And then as the season progresses, they all rebound, and they are all studs for fantasy. So I'm not worried about either one of these players or Joe Burrow. You just got to chalk it up as a bad game. The weather was bad. They were all rusty because none of them had played preseason. Burrow was rusty. So you just kind of got to chalk this game up, throw it out, and start again.
Yeah, I'm sending some trades for T. Higgins personally. Like, there's some players that we truly are panicked on. If you can package somebody, who 2 players who did well but were well below T. Higgins' talent level, just go look in the past few years. T. Higgins has really been on pace to almost match Jahmyr Chase as far as production, so he's a buy low for me. All right, last chance to enter a free Keenan Allen signed jersey giveaway. Signature right there. All you got to do is subscribe to the channel and leave a comment on this video, and you'll be entered to win. And in the next video, our very next video, we will announce the winner. So enter now. All you do is subscribe, leave a comment. All right, back to the video. Cam Akers. Wee woo, panic alert. This is the full panic. This not even a little panic, not even starting to panic. I usually don't overreact to week 1, but I don't think this is an overreaction. He had 8.9 points, and his day was saved by a touchdown. To me, because of that, if you got somebody who doesn't watch the game or doesn't know the situation, you can try to sell while you can. I'm trying to get anything valuable for fantasy. 35% of the snaps. He had 22 carries for 29 yards, so the production was not good. He wasn't on the field. He was the backup. He had 1.32 yards per carry, which is that's just awful. Kyron Williams, who we thought was the backup, it seems to be the starter with 65% of the snaps, looked better on the ground and got goal line work. So there's nothing going for Cam Akers at this point other than maybe he gets in, a little bit his 1/3 of the snaps. And the team just doesn't seem to like him. I'm panicked on Cam Akers.
Yep. I'm trying to get anything, including a bag of chips for him at this point. I think the longer you hold, especially the upcoming matchups against the Niners, it's not good. He's not going to succeed against the Niners. And I believe they also play like 1 or 2 other tough teams as well. So maybe the Eagles in there. So, yeah, I'm looking to get rid of him at all cost. Next up is going to be Christian Kirk, who had a solid 1.4 points in half PPR. This is a starting to panic for us, which, depending on how week 2 goes, can increase to a full panic. So in week 1, he only saw 60% of the snaps, and he played 0 two wide receiver formation snaps. So he is by far the third receiver in their pecking order. They like Ridley and Zay Jones over him. Trevor Lawrence threw 32 passes, and Kirk only saw 3 targets, which is not good. He had 1 catch for 9 yards. If he continues this next week against the Lions, playing that low amount of snaps, and he's that low on the target pecking order, that's when I'm going to start becoming a full panic on him, because if he's not playing snaps and he's not getting hyper targeted when he's on the field, you're never going to be able to trust him. And at that point, I mean, he's just a bench guy, if not a drop for me.
Yes, guys, 60% of the snaps is bad. That's really bad. And 1 catch, no. I wasn't in on him in the draft season. I only have him on 1 team, and that's because I'm in a league where me and my friend, we get 1 draft pick for each other, and he picked Christian Kirk for me, and I'm thinking about dropping him, man. I don't want him at all, but I would not recommend dropping him. I'm waiting and seeing what's happening, and I didn't drop him, so I'm waiting and seeing what's happening in week 2. All right, Jahmyr Gibbs, absolutely not panicked. If you watch the game, which I know a lot of people did, so I don't think it's going to be easy to buy him low necessarily, but I would still send some offers and see what you can get. He's going to go up from here for sure. Obviously, a rookie, going to take a little bit to get worked in. We thought he would get a little more work, but when he was on the field, he looked electric. He looked really good. I wasn't even disappointed. You know, as a guy who has him on multiple teams, only 7 points on the week, I wasn't even disappointed with that. I'm just like, you know, I wish it was a better week, but I'm very happy to see his potential. Obviously, a really good offense, and he's going to be a key piece of that. I'm hoping they get him more involved in the passing game, which we expect them to. I know that they said they would get him more involved. The coaches are already getting annoyed, saying we were going to get him more involved, but people keep asking, so now we're not. Obviously, it was a joke, but everybody wants Jahmyr Gibbs involved, and he will get more involved as the season goes on.
Yeah, so I sent a trade for Jahmyr Gibbs today, actually, in a league that I lost J.K. Dobbins in. I sent Kyron Williams and Mike Williams for Jahmyr Gibbs. So
Banger.
No idea if that's going to be accepted, but that's about the value you can expect. That's not a buy low by any means. That's a buy at value currently. But for me, Jahmyr Gibbs, especially if you lost Dobbins or another running back, or you just don't have good depth, that is a move I'm looking to make because Gibbs' upside is insane. All right, next up on our panic meter is the entire Seahawks offense. So the reason we're starting to panic on the Seahawks is they didn't look great in what was projected to be, you know, a pretty easy matchup for them. The Rams defense wasn't projected to be very good. Lockett was held to 2 half PPR points. Granted, he did leave the game with a concussion, so you got to monitor that to make sure he's even going to play this week. And DK did have 12.2 points. Most of that came from a touchdown catch, which, you know, he does do. But the big worry is that they lost both their left and right starting tackles. On an offensive line that already wasn't solid, now you lose both of your tackles, and you're in a division where you have to play the Niners twice. That's not good. So Geno only threw for 112 yards, and there's 3 receivers there. They're kind of all going to cannibalize each other, in my opinion, target-wise. So I'm not full panic on them yet, but if they look miserable against the Lions in week 2, that's when I'm just going to kind of freak out a little bit, because if they can't succeed against the secondary, because the Lions defense is good, especially against running backs, but they're not elite. But if they're not having any passing success against that team, then I'm going to full-blown panic for the Seahawks personally.
It limits all their upside. Like even Kenneth Walker, who in week 1 actually kind of established his role. Like he as far as a role perspective, it's sort of best case scenario for Kenneth Walker, but if that offense can't get going, and there's not enough touchdown opportunities, that could look bad for him, although I'm not panicking on him specifically. Mostly it's the passing game there.
And another level of worry for Kenneth Walker is the Lions seem to be an easy matchup in your head, but in now 10 out of the last 11 games, they've held their opposing running back to 9 or less fantasy points.
Oh, yeah.
The only running back in their last 11 games to score more than that was Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Foreman.
We'll talk more about them later. There's some good run defenses that we're starting to see as we get more data on these defenses. Isiah Pacheco, we're not panicking on at all. If anything, you could probably buy him low if you're needy at running back. Maybe somebody is panicking on him. He only had 7.4 half PPR points, but his workload was also a little bit worrying. I think he had like 45% of the snaps, which is not great, but I think he should only get better from here. He's had 4 targets in 9 of the last 10 games, which is really good. If you're in any kind of PPR, there should be passes to go around, especially with that wide receiver core. They played the Lions, so again, that's a kind of a consistent thing. If you go back to last year, they were really good against the run. And CEH should get phased out. He did play in a little bit in week 1. I don't think that that's going to hold. I don't really think they're going to be able to keep that up. Even if they want to, he's just a better player than CEH is, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I think it'll be more of a 2-man backfield with him and McKinnon. And you got to keep in mind that McKinnon is 31. So I think Pacheco is the more promising runner, and he has a lot of upside with touchdowns in that offense.
I agree. All right, next up is going to be pretty much all the top 10 tight ends. Every top 10 tight end that was drafted, except maybe Hawkinson, was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But welcome to the tight end position, honestly. Mostly not panicking on any of these guys, such as Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Kittle, Njoku, Freiermuth. The tight end position is what the tight end position is. Goedert just saw 7 targets in yesterday's game against the Vikings. Kittle was coming off an injury last week, so he is now another week healthier from that. So hopefully he's involved a little bit more. Njoku, they had terrible weather, and again, they were beating the brakes off the Bengals, so they didn't necessarily have to pass a ton once they got up. And Pat Freiermuth played San Fran. He caught a touchdown and then got knocked out of the game due to a chest injury. I do believe he was able to return at some point, but I'm not positive how much game time he actually missed. And then Waller's injury is kind of confusing and weird. It's a hamstring, but it's not actually the hamstring. It is the sciatic nerve that lies under the hamstring. So it is something he can play through, and it's kind of just a pain management thing. He could play the rest of the season and be perfectly fine. He could play this week in practice and it flare up and him be out. That's kind of the game you have to play with Waller. If you can trade him and get equal value, I would consider it. But I'm not dropping him from any of the guys on the waiver wire because as long as Waller is playing, he provides vastly more upside than anybody you could find on the waiver. And then the only one that we might be a little worried on is just Kyle Pitts, which is the same argument we've had the past 2 or 3 years with him. He's just in an offense that does not throw the ball. And he's an elite talent, and it's very unfortunate that he's on this offense because he could be a great tight end. If you watch his game film from this past week, he was open like 12 times, like wide open, and Ritter just did not look his way. So it is unfortunate, but his upside is unfortunately capped in this offense because they just don't throw the ball and they just don't look to him for whatever reason. I think
the general advice for me for these tight ends is just, obviously they didn't have a big week, but I'm not going to go overreact and trade or pick up like a Hunter Henry who got a touchdown just because my tight end didn't get a touchdown this week. Guys, it's gonna alternate, and then this week it'll be Kittle gets 2 touchdowns or something like that. It's very unpredictable. I'm not overreacting in the tight end thing because these guys on waivers like Ozart, none of these guys are going to be. All right, James Cook 8.3 points. Not panicking on James Cook. Actually, pretty promising the workload we saw. He was definitely the lead back on the Bills. They had a pretty rough start against the Jets, who have a really good defense, but I imagine they'll get it together and there'll be some touchdown upside there for James Cook. Also saw decent involvement in the passing game. 6 targets is really good. And again, he's a young player going into his second year. He should get better from here.
Up next, Dameon Pierce, and he is again a starting to panic for us. So coming into the season, we thought he was going to dominate the workload for that team. But unfortunately, in week 1, he did not. He only played 45% of the snaps. Mike Boone played 31%, and Singletary played 21%. So the fact that Mike Boone is getting 31% and Singletary is getting 21% is very worrisome. Because if he's on a bad offense that's not going to score much, he's not an elite pass catcher. I think he did have 3 catches this week, which isn't nothing. That is actually a solid baseline if he were to get that every week. But the offense is just very poor. And if he's not dominating snap percentages in like the 65 to 70 range, then he's going to be very disappointing for fantasy. So again, we're just starting to. I would like to see how the snap percentages play out this upcoming week. But if he's not dominating touches, then he's at best a touchdown dependent flex.
Yeah, and the hope there, it's not a great offense. The hope is he pretty much has to be a workhorse guy, which is why late in the draft season I started to become off on Dameon Pierce because his ADP just got way too high up into the 4th, 5th round, where I'm starting to think the risk is too high here for not enough reward, and it's not looking good for his workload. Hopefully he can get that up, but I'm starting to panic.
Yeah, and not to mention they've lost like 4 of their offensive line starters already. Like they're picking dudes up off the street and plugged them right in. They traded for the Cardinals' 4th string left tackle, and they plugged him straight into their lineup.
That's bad.
So, yeah, their offensive line is just decimated right now.
All right. A player we're not panicking on, Javonte Williams, who we knew was going to be on a pitch count going into the game, obviously coming off of his multiple tears in his knee. So, we didn't expect a ton. He got 7.7 points, which is not bad. Obviously, you want more from that, but he only saw 45% of the snaps. We expect that to go up because the team told us that they were going to limit his snaps, meaning in the future, he's going to get more than that. And 13 carries and 6 targets in a game where he played less than half the snaps is really good. I expect him to get more into the 60s as the season goes on, maybe like approaching 70% of snaps, which if he can do that and Russ continues to lean into targeting the running backs as much as he is, given some of that is probably because Jerry Jeudy was out, that tendency is still there, and that's going to be a lot of value for the running backs there, and he should get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, and if you watch the game, he actually looked pretty decent. He looked, like you would expect someone coming off that significant of an injury to look in his first game back. He's not as explosive as he was last year, but he'll work back up to that. So I do like trying to buy low right now on Javonte. And last up, we have Alexander Mattison. And if you're on Twitter or any type of media, you have known that the fantasy world has blown up on Alexander Mattison. They think he is the worst running back known to man.
It's victory laps.
People are victory lapping like crazy, which victory lapping a 5th or 6th round pick is kind of crazy to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like he was a 1st or 2nd rounder. But in half-point PPR, he scored 11.9 points week 1 and 3.4 points in week 2, which 11.9 really isn't killing you in half PPR. 3.4, that's a bad game. Yeah. But he did play the Buccaneers and the Eagles, which are 2 top 5 run defenses. And if you look at the Vikings scenario, they've already lost 2 offensive line starters. They are not season-ending injuries, so they are going to get these players back. But unfortunately, during these tough 2 matchups, they did not have those guys. So that did hurt Madison's chances. And also in both of these games, the Vikings got down. So they kind of had to abandon the run and just throw the ball a ton. But as the season progresses, the line gets healthier and they get more favorable matchups. I think Madison's a fine RB2 play. And if a lot of my leagues, I went wide receiver heavy. So Alexander Madison's my running back 1, which I drafted in the 6th round of a lot of my leagues. But when you have 4 top 24 receivers, you can kind of afford, Alexander Mattison to give you that 11.9 points, etc. So I would not be opposed to buying low on Mattison right now, especially if the sentiment of the Mattison owner in your league is that he's trash. If he's seeing all these people on Twitter post about how bad he sucks, swoop in and get him right now.
Send him all the tweets you find because there are going to be a plenty. Yep. Every fantasy analyst is crapping on him right now. So I would buy low. I'm not going to buy I'm not going to send a lot for him. I'm going to try to lowball him. The schedule will get a lot better, and they may have just played 2 of the top 5 teams in the NFL possibly based on what we're seeing.
Defenses.
Run defenses for sure. Yeah. And what I'm saying is both of those teams also can score a ton and get ahead. So if we can get a lead going for Mattison and, like you said, get that line. The Eagles' defensive line is insane. And I don't see people panicking on Ramondre Stevenson, who played the Eagles in week 1 and had 12 carries for 25 yards, which was even worse than what Mattison did on the ground. Nobody's panicking on him. I think it's more likely that both of these players aren't trash, but rather the Eagles' defensive line, where they just drafted Jalen Carter and stole him in the 1st round, is probably just really, really good. And Mattison should have some bounce-back games coming up with an easy schedule. And he's one of the he's still one of the like most workhorse backs there is at this point, and he doesn't have a real backup. The only real thing that would make me panic would be some kind of free agent signing.
Yep, agreed.
All right. Enter to give away the Keenan Allen signed jersey. Last chance. Subscribe and leave a comment. That's all you got to do. And we'll give it away beginning of next week, next video. Thank you guys for tuning in. We've been the Fantasy Bros, and we're out.